All right, we got LSU, we got Wisconsin. We've talked this one up all off season, and man, this is going to be just an unreal venue to see a college football game. And you got two teams that we saw 2 years ago at Reliance Stadium really slug it out. Melvin Gordon having his way for 3 quarters, had to leave the game. Wisconsin lost a couple D tackles and got run over in the fourth quarter after they led 24-7, and Brandon Harris, lo and behold, actually made a couple plays downfield that proved to be the difference in a very good 28-24 game. So, Dave, we'll start with you with the Tigers taking on the Badgers at Lambeau.
It's kind of funny you mentioned to Brandon Harris how he kind of, made some plays there, and I kind of think that will be the similar style of this game. Dave Aranda comes in from Wisconsin, so I think he knows that staff well. He knows those players well. I think that'd be an advantage for LSU. But that Wisconsin defense, led by their linebacking core, that linebacking core might be one of the best in the Big Ten, and I think they can give Leonard Fournette, who may not be 100%, give him a little bit of trouble. Maybe early on, and then I think that will kind of force LSU maybe to throw the ball a little bit. And while I'm not too high on Brandon Harris, I think he'll be a better quarterback this year. He won't be as bad as he was last year, but I will think he'll get off to a fast start this year. And I think what LSU will do, they'll open up the passing game a little bit because I don't think they'll have as much success running the ball with Fournette and guys there. But I think they'll keep pounding it, and they'll run some play action where I think Brandon Harris will hit Doral or Dupree pretty often for a couple big plays there. And I do think LSU will travel up north to Lambeau and what should be a pretty neat setting there. And I wonder, I think we're all ready to see if Les Miles will eat some Lambeau grass there. I'm looking forward to that.
Mark, I think the biggest question mark in this game is going to be how many of the LSU players have to hitch a ride back to Baton Rouge. Les Miles has already said no Lambeau leaps, and if they do it, they're hitching a ride back to Baton Rouge. If you look at Wisconsin, they had some good defensive numbers last year, but one, Dave Aranda's gone, and two, if you look at their competition, look, winning 10 games in the FBS is impressive. I don't care who you are, I don't care who you beat. But if you look at those 10 wins with Wisconsin, it just doesn't give you confidence that they're going to be able to translate that into beating a team in LSU that I think is going to be a really good team. They're going to have to defend against Leonard Fournette, who's probably just as big as 3 of those 4 starting Wisconsin linebackers. And then I think Brandon Harris is going to have a good start to the season. If you look at the formation, I think Harris, again, is going to be able to hit that tight end like kind of Dave alluded to, hit some of the short routes, and just the balance on that offense. I think special teams might come into play here. I just think LSU is too athletic for Wisconsin to keep up. And I think LSU kind of runs away with this one.
No pun intended, right, Mike?
No pun intended.
Yeah, and to kind of shore up your fact about Fournette being some of the size of their linebackers, you look at their outside linebacker and T.J. Watt Jr., he's 6'5", 247, so pretty darn close. And you take a look at this game. This is the 3rd straight season for Wisconsin to open up against an SEC team, albeit this is the 2nd time they played LSU. So, all 3 will be at neutral sites. Granted, I think Lambeau Field is pretty good for being at home. Kind of closer to home for them. That being said, they've got 12 returning starters, 6 on offense, 6 on defense. Their defense is really made up of a lot of upperclassmen. They've got 2 sophomores on that defense, but everybody else is juniors and seniors, and especially in that secondary, they've got a lot of senior leadership there. I think Wisconsin defensively can test Brandon Harris if he wants to go, but the athletes by far at LSU in the wide receiver position are far better than anything Wisconsin's going to see throughout the year, than maybe outside of Ohio State and some guys sprinkled here and there. But as a group, that's a solid core that they're going to have to face. And I think as far as the running game is concerned, Fournette and what you've got, we know what they're going to be able to do as far as Ethan leading the way in the offensive line. I think this is going to be the area where Fournette comes out and makes his mark. But I agree with what the guys were saying. This is Brandon Harris's opportunity to come out and show people that he is capable of being a very good quarterback, not just a guy that can hand the ball off to Fournette. And so I think that's going to be key for Wisconsin on offense. This could be a big struggle for them. They lost their starting left guard, Dan Volt, who decided he wanted to go ahead and retire. I think that's going to be huge for them, and Corey Clement in the running game. That could be a major blow for them, and a little bit of a transition right there between the tackles, as it were. And they're the type of team that lines up 22 personnel. They're going to have 2 tight ends, 2 wide receiver sets, and they're going to try to run that ball down your throat. And when you lose a guy as seasoned as Volt on that left guard position, trust me when I tell you, you're going to feel that pain in the run game when you try to go to that left side. So I feel like that could be an area where LSU can expose them. They've got Valentine back on the defensive line. This dude is 330 pounds and is eating double teams alive in LSU scrimmages, and he's going up against their starting offensive line. So that should tell you how good this guy is. So I think the defensive front for LSU is going to have a field day and get pressure on him by the end of the game, third and fourth quarter. LSU's defense should be getting plenty of pressure on the quarterback, and that being the key, I think LSU does run away with it. Again, no pun intended, but I do feel like LSU is going to get this game pretty easy.
Chad, I shot you a look when you said that this is the most dynamic playmakers that Wisconsin's going to face this year. And then you threw out Ohio State, so you redeemed yourself right there.
It was a quick recovery, man. I tried not to fumble the ball completely. It was just kind of a
people wonder why we talk about schedule so much. And to Mike's point, Wisconsin went 10-3 last year, so they were 9-3, and people had little confidence in them matching up against USC because they faced the 3 worst teams in the East. And I know this isn't a Big Ten show, but they faced the 3 worst teams in the East. This season they play the 3 best teams in the East, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, on top of LSU and everything they face with Iowa and Nebraska. It's the 7th most difficult schedule. You guys know that, according to Mark Rogers TV. So anyway, Wisconsin,
Phil still picked Wisconsin last year to be to win out the West, and it didn't happen, I don't believe. So
yeah.
And Mark, to your point, they played Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Iowa in games 4, 5, 6, and 7. So Chris might be looking forward and setting his team up for that Big Ten stretch, not the LSU game.
So, Mike, I set you up with in regards to what you outlined for Wisconsin's 9-3 campaign, but then they did show up in the Holiday Bowl and they beat USC head-to-head, and I couldn't find a prediction on the internet that gave Wisconsin a chance in that game. So we've seen it over the years because of the bowl matchups that Wisconsin faces this type situation a lot, and they usually play very well. They usually match up and they give it a go and give it a game regardless of the speed mismatch. They give it a game, and if you look through what Wisconsin's been able to do against the SEC, they win their fair share. They usually lose. They win about 40 or 45% of those matchups, and they usually don't get blown out. It's usually a very competitive game. That said, they got to get their mojo back in the ground game like Chad talked about, because last year Wisconsin had its worst rushing effort. So we think the Maulers up front and the great running back, and Wisconsin runs the ball just about as well as anyone in the country. They didn't last year. They had their worst rushing effort since 1995 at 150 yards per game. Now, Corey Clement missed most of last year, came back, then he got suspended, then he came back for the bowl game and played well. So he's key, along with the offensive front, of course, in taking on that LSU front. Bart Houston at quarterback, he would have won the job if he was really that good of a quarterback earlier over Joel Stave, but he didn't. So I've got to question Bart Houston against the LSU defense. And Wisconsin, outside of Jared Abbrederis in recent years, just never has that guy. This is typically a top 15 or 20 team, but they never have that guy on the outside that scares anyone, let alone 2 or 3 or 4 guys like that. So limited, they got to play the perfect game. LSU wins. Wisconsin does the fundamentals, the technically sound things to keep them close, but it's a 30-17 kind of LSU victory right there.